The words tumbled from 6-year-old Lily's mouth with the innocent honesty only a child could deliver. Your eyes look like my mommy's before she went to heaven. Sad, but trying to hide it. Standing in her yellow sundress, sand between her toes, she stared up at the stranger, a woman whose designer sunglasses couldn't quite mask the tear stains on her cheeks. Neither Lily nor her father could have possibly known that this chance encounter would change all their lives forever. If you're touched by what happens next in this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more content that warms your heart and reminds us all of the unexpected ways our lives can transform when we least expect it. Mark Davies wiped sweat from his brow as he chased after his daughter on the secluded stretch of beach. At 34, he had the tired eyes of someone who hadn't properly slept in the 3 years since his wife's passing. Between working 2 jobs and raising Lily alone, moments of pure joy like this, watching her dance along the shoreline as sunset painted the sky in magnificent oranges and pinks, were rare treasures he clung to. Lily. Not too close to the water, sweetheart, he called, his voice carrying across the evening breeze. He'd saved for months to afford this week-long vacation on the Massachusetts coast, a modest rental cottage that was walking distance to this quiet beach. It wasn't the luxurious getaway his daughter deserved, but it was all he could manage on a teacher's salary supplemented by weekend shifts at a local hardware store. That's when he spotted the woman. She sat alone on a weathered driftwood log, expensive heels discarded beside her as her toes dug into the sand. Even from a distance, Mark could tell she didn't belong here. This wasn't a beach frequented by tourists, it was too rocky, too unmanicured. Locals called it Forgotten Shore, and most visitors opted for the more popular beaches a few miles down the coast. Before he could redirect Lily away from the stranger, his daughter had already skipped toward her, always too friendly for her own good. Mark jogged to catch up, embarrassment flooding his cheeks. "I'm so sorry," he began, reaching for Lily's hand. "She doesn't quite understand." "It's all right," the woman said, her voice carrying a slight tremor beneath its polished tone. "She just asked if I was okay." She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes swollen from crying, beautiful eyes the color of storm clouds. That's when Lily made her shocking observation about the woman's eyes resembling her late mother's. The statement hung between the 3 of them, creating a strange, electric moment of connection. "I apologize for my daughter," Mark said softly. "She sometimes speaks without." "No," the woman interrupted. "She's right." A sad smile crossed her face as she looked at Lily. "You're very perceptive, young lady." Mark found himself seated on the driftwood beside the woman who introduced herself simply as Elena. He couldn't place her accent, something European perhaps, subtle but distinct. As Lily collected seashells nearby, keeping within her father's watchful gaze, Elena surprised him by opening up. "I just lost a billion-dollar company I spent 15 years building," she said, staring out at the horizon. "Not lost, had it taken from me. By people I trusted. Family, even." Mark blinked, uncertain he'd heard correctly. "$1 billion. Elena nodded, brushing sand from her slacks that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "My father founded Meridian Technologies in our garage when I was a child. I took over when he died, expanded it globally. Then my stepbrother and the board orchestrated a takeover while I was dealing with." She paused, "personal matters." Mark listened, feeling increasingly out of his depth. His problems, overdue utility bills and finding affordable childcare, seemed trivial compared to corporate betrayals involving billions. Yet there was something in Elena's expression that reminded him of his own reflection on those darkest nights after losing his wife, the look of someone who'd had their foundation ripped away. "I'm sorry," he offered simply, knowing no words could ease that kind of pain. "What about you?" she asked, seeming genuinely interested in shifting focus from her troubles. Mark laughed softly. "Nothing quite so dramatic. I teach high school science in Connecticut. My wife, Claire, passed away 3 years ago, cancer. It's just been Lily and me since then. Something in Elena's expression softened. "That's infinitely more significant than anything I've lost," she said quietly. As sunset deepened into twilight, Lily returned with handfuls of shells, insisting on showing her new friend each treasure. Elena examined each one with surprising patience, asking questions that delighted the little girl. When Lily mentioned being hungry, Mark reluctantly stood to leave. "We should head back to our cottage for dinner," he said, surprised by his reluctance to end this strange encounter. Elena hesitated before asking, "Would you both, perhaps like to join me instead? I'm staying at the Harborview Inn up the coast. Their restaurant is quite good." Mark immediately shook his head. "That's very kind, but it's much too expensive, Anne." "Please," Elena said, something vulnerable crossing her face. "I've been alone for weeks now, avoiding everyone. Your daughter's honesty is the first real conversation I've had in longer than I care to admit." Against his better judgment, Mark found himself agreeing. That dinner changed everything. The Harborview Inn was every bit as exclusive as Mark had feared. He felt painfully out of place in his worn jeans and faded t-shirt, but Elena moved through the space with an authority that silenced any questioning glances. Lily, oblivious to social hierarchies, chattered happily about her first-grade teacher and the sandcastle she'd built earlier that day. Over freshly caught seafood and sparkling water, Elena had noted Mark's discomfort when the waiter suggested wine pairings. Their conversation deepened. Mark learned that Elena had been engaged until recently, another casualty of her corporate downfall. He sided with them, she said simply, her expression hardening momentarily before softening as she watched Lily carefully cutting her fish into tiny pieces. Mark shared more about Claire, how they'd met in college, her passion for marine biology, how brutally quick the cancer had progressed. "The hardest part is watching Lily grow up without her mother," he admitted. "There are questions she asks that I don't know how to answer. Like what happens when you die?" Lily chimed in with the directness of children, causing a nearby diner to glance over in shock. Elena didn't flinch. "That's a very big question," she told Lily seriously. "What do you think happens? Daddy says Mommy became part of the ocean and the stars and everything beautiful. But sometimes I just want her to be my mommy again." Mark felt his throat tighten as Elena reached across the table and gently took Lily's hand. "I think your daddy is very wise. And I think your mommy would be so proud of how brave you are." As they walked along the moonlit harbor after dinner, Lily skipping ahead to count boats, Elena confessed something unexpected. "I was supposed to be in meetings all this week, fighting to reclaim what's mine. Instead, I just left. Drove until I found the most remote beach I could. My lawyers are probably frantic." "What will you do now?" Mark asked. "That's just it," she replied, stopping to watch a sailboat glide past. "For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. Everything I've ever done has been strategic, calculated. Even my engagement was." She stopped herself. "Well, let's just say I've never done anything simply because it made me happy." "What would make you happy right now?" Mark asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Elena looked at him for a long moment before answering. "This. Right now. No expectations, no agendas. Just being present." On impulse, Mark invited Elena to join them at the cottage the next day for a proper beach day, picnic lunch, sandcastles, and swimming. He expected polite refusal but was stunned when she immediately accepted. What followed was a week that seemed plucked from someone else's life. Elena arrived the next morning in clothes so casual Mark barely recognized her, jean shorts and a simple white blouse, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She brought an extravagant picnic prepared by the inn's chef and beach toys for Lily that made the little girl squeal with delight. Each day, the unlikely trio grew closer. Elena proved surprisingly adept at building elaborate sandcastles, revealing she'd studied architecture before business school. She listened to Mark's passionate explanations about marine ecosystems with genuine interest. And with Lily, she displayed a natural warmth that made Mark's heart ache with both joy and caution. By the fourth day, something had shifted between them. As Lily napped under their beach umbrella, exhausted from swimming, Mark found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone: his fears of failing as a single parent, the crushing loneliness of nights after Lily was asleep, the guilt he felt for sometimes wishing for a life beyond grief. "You're remarkable," Elena told him, her fingers inches from his on the blanket. "Most people would crumble under what you've endured." "I could say the same about you," he replied. "Losing everything you've built." "Not everything," she said quietly, looking over at sleeping Lily. "This week has made me question what everything really means." On their last evening together, Elena insisted on cooking dinner at their cottage. She arrived with bags from the local market and took over the tiny kitchen, laughing at the limited utensils. "My first apartment had even less," she admitted, chopping vegetables with unexpected skill. "Before my father's company took off, we were practically poor. I learned to cook from my grandmother." The meal she prepared, a rustic Italian pasta that filled the cottage with mouth-watering aromas, tasted better than anything from the fancy restaurant. After dinner, as Lily showed Elena her bedtime storybooks, Mark stepped outside onto the small porch, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. Elena joined him minutes later. "She's asking for you. For her goodnight kiss." "Thank you for this week," Mark said, unable to meet her eyes. "For being so kind to Lily." "Mark," Elena said softly, placing her hand on his arm. "This week saved me. I need you to understand that." When he finally looked at her, the moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks. Without thinking, he reached out to brush them away. The moment his fingers touched her skin, something electric passed between them. "I leave tomorrow," she whispered. "Back to reality. Is that what you want?" Elena closed her eyes. "I want..." she began, then stopped. "I need to fight for what's mine. I can't just abandon everything I've built." Mark nodded, stepping back. "I understand. You have responsibilities. A life to return to. But this week has changed how I see that life," she continued. "What Lily said that first day, about my eyes looking sad but trying to hide it, she was right. I've been hiding from myself for years, pretending success and power were enough." After Lily was asleep, they sat on the porch talking until dawn. Elena shared her plan to restructure her approach to regaining her company, focusing on sustainable development rather than just profit, values she'd compromised over the years. Mark confessed his dream of eventually earning a PhD in marine biology, his passion before life's responsibilities had intervened. When morning came, the goodbye was painful. Lily clung to Elena, refusing to let go until promised they would meet again. Mark remained more reserved, shaking Elena's hand formally while his heart thundered in his chest. "This isn't goodbye," Elena insisted as her driver loaded her luggage into the waiting car. "This is just, until next time." But as the expensive car disappeared down the gravel road, Mark couldn't help feeling they'd experienced something beautiful that couldn't exist in the real world. A billionaire businesswoman and a struggling single father? It seemed like fantasy. 2 months later, back in their small Connecticut apartment, life had returned to its familiar rhythm. Mark graded papers at the kitchen table while Lily colored beside him, the evening news playing softly in the background. He barely glanced up when the business segment began, until he heard a familiar name. In shocking corporate news, Elena Valentini has regained control of Meridian Technologies after exposing financial misconduct by former board members. In her first statement as reinstated CEO, Valentini announced a new direction for the tech giant, focusing on educational initiatives and environmental sustainability. Mark's pen froze mid-grade as Elena's face filled the screen. She looked different, stronger, but also somehow softer than the woman he'd met on the beach. Lily looked up from her coloring book. "That's our friend," she exclaimed. "Daddy, look." The news continued. Valentini has also announced the establishment of the Claire Davies Memorial Scholarship, providing full college funding for children who have lost a parent to cancer. When asked about the unusual name choice, Valentini stated simply, "Sometimes, the most important business lessons come from unexpected places." Mark felt the room spin around him. A knock at the door startled him back to reality. Crossing the small living room, he opened it without checking the peephole, and found himself face to face with Elena. "I should have called first," she said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "But I was afraid you might tell me not to come." Behind her stood a driver with several suitcases. "I've taken an apartment in New Haven," she explained. "The East Coast headquarters for Meridian's new education division will be based there. It's about 30 minutes from here." Before Mark could respond, Lily had pushed past him and thrown herself into Elena's arms. Over his daughter's head, Elena's eyes met his, questioning, hopeful. "You named a scholarship after Claire," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Elena nodded. "I told you that week changed everything for me. I meant it. You can't just uproot your life. Your company is based in California. Your whole world is." "My world," Elena interrupted gently, "is wherever I choose it to be. For the first time in my life, I'm making that choice based on what brings me joy rather than what brings me power." She set Lily down and took a step toward him. "I'm not expecting anything, Mark. I just want a chance to see if what we found on that beach could grow into something real." In that moment, Mark understood what his daughter had seen from the very beginning. Beneath the wealth and power, Elena was someone whose heart had been broken, just like theirs. And perhaps, together, they might help each other heal. "Would you like to come in for dinner?" he asked, stepping aside. "Fair warning, it won't be anything like that pasta you made." Elena's smile was worth more than all her billions. "Actually," she said, reaching for a bag her driver handed her, "I brought ingredients. I thought maybe I could teach you both how to make my grandmother's recipe." As they moved into the small kitchen together, Lily chattering excitedly between them, Mark felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of his life expanding rather than contracting, of possibilities opening before him rather than doors closing. 3 lives, connected by a chance encounter on a forgotten shore. A little girl's innocent observation. A father learning to open his heart again. And a woman discovering that true wealth had nothing to do with money. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest truths, like the words of a child who sees what adults try to hide, or the courage to admit that even the strongest among us need human connection more than corporate success. As Elena taught Lily how to roll pasta dough, flour dusting her expensive blouse, her laughter filling the modest apartment, Mark understood that what had seemed impossible on that beach was actually the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes family isn't what you're born into, but what you build together from the broken pieces of separate lives. And sometimes, healing begins with a single, shocking moment of truth, spoken by a child on a windswept beach, to 2 broken hearts ready to become whole again.